Hello, everyone.
Hi.
My name is Jameson, and I want to start off by saying thank you for having me here. I moved to Taiwan in March from San Francisco, and every day I watch the news, I'm reminded of how grateful I am to be in Taiwan. So, thank you. All right. Today, I'm going to talk a little bit about how to impress early stage investors. Just to give a little background, James kind of briefly touched on it, but I've started, you see 4 companies up here. I have a 5th one that I'm working on right now, actually in Taiwan, but we're very far from having a product, so I don't even use it. I've started, first company is design, game development, second was game advertising, third was iOS virtualization, fourth was video streaming for chefs. So I've done a bunch of different things, not in any particular vertical, and from those I worked at Shanda, worked at Facebook, worked at Tencent, most of them through acquisition. And I've been investing for over 10 years now. I've invested in 40 companies. I've seen a lot of pitches. I've seen a lot of people. I've met a lot of founders, and I've seen a lot of pitch decks and heard a lot of stories. So hopefully today I'll kind of give you a little summary of what I've seen and what I think can help a lot of young entrepreneurs. I should start by asking how many people in this room, and I see a raise of hands, are currently entrepreneurs, founders, or hope to be entrepreneurs? Okay, what are you doing? All right, I like this guy over here. 这位先生，你举手。I like this. No startup, being a founder, there's no age discrimination. I love it. All right, but I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. All right, so to make things simple and easy to digest, we're going to go through a simple framework called the 3 Ps. We're going to cover preparedness, persona, and presentation. These are sort of 3 key areas that I try to tell people that I'm mentoring or working with on how they can better prepare themselves when meeting with investors. So first, preparedness. The definition of preparedness is a state of readiness, especially for war. So when you're starting a company, it's like going to war. Most people don't realize it when they're starting, because I think tech now is sort of very glamorous, and they think, I'm going to start a company. But they don't realize how difficult it can be. You're going to go through emotional roller coasters. You're going to experience physical and mental exhaustion. You're going to you may experience the fear of death. And you most likely will at some point cry because of how hard it is to run your startup. So you definitely need to be prepared. One thing that you see that's common across all startups at the early stage is they have 2 common resources, time and money. And this is sort of pretty obvious in that startups have limited money and mostly more time. But time is also closely tied to money in that over time, if you don't have money, you're not going to have enough time to see your vision out. So what I look for when I'm looking at companies is I try to measure them by how well they've spent the limited time and limited money that they have, and how far they've gotten with those resources. So here's a very simple example of how companies utilize time and money. When a technology comes out, like AI or machine learning, you tend to see a lot of companies start to sprout up from those technologies. And in that period, you will, as an investor, you'll see 5 pitches for companies with AI, right? Dozens of pitches from companies doing LiDAR or whatever, quantum computing or cryptocurrency, whatever the sort of flavor of the month is. And the one distinguishing factor for these companies is because you kind of know when the technology comes out and all these people start pitching, everyone's roughly on the same timeline. So you can tell how good a company is by how far they've gotten with the product, with the company progress, with customer acquisition. And that is a very obvious indicator. And I don't think people, most founders don't appreciate this in that they think, because they themselves don't understand how far they've gotten because they are not seeing, they don't have a really good high-level understanding of the landscape. So, myself as an investor, I'll see 5 companies. I can kind of tell right when I meet somebody if they're far along or they're really far behind because I've looked at other companies. But for a founder, they are so deep in it, they can't really tell how far they are. So this point is really, I try to tell people, don't waste time and don't waste money. Obviously don't waste money, but more importantly, don't waste time. People take time for granted, and they tend to misuse their time. So there's a book called Outliers by this guy Malcolm Gladwell, and in it he basically says to attain mastery of the subject, doing it, and that equates to about 10 hours or 10 years if you're going to look at it for about 4 hours a day. Most of us don't have 10 years to spare to wait to start a company. But as an investor, you want to see people that have developed some sort of mastery, whether it's in an industry or whether it's in a technical domain. So, for example, if you meet somebody that's been working in AI since the inception, or somebody that, for example, created a programming language, like Python or Rust or Erlang or something. Or, for example, the founders of Hadoop or Docker, or Kubernetes. These guys have obviously developed tremendous domain expertise, technical expertise. And as an investor, you know that they've developed a tremendous level of mastery. A big thing that investors are looking for in seeing that somebody has mastery is an understanding of their industry. So many times I go to meetings and I ask somebody about whether or not, how big is their industry, how big is the market, who are their potential customers, how much are they spending. And when I meet people that know these numbers right off the bat and spout them off, then you know that these guys have spent a lot of time really developing expertise and mastery in the domain. It really kills me when I talk to founders and I ask them these questions about their space and they can't answer the question. That just shows me that they're not prepared. So the big thing is be prepared, know your stuff, and there's nothing more exciting to an investor than numbers. Investors love when people know their numbers, and they especially love big numbers. So, Phil, this is Phil Chen. You guys are going to hear from him a little later on. Phil has invested tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars in the companies. Phil is a very prolific investor and he loves big numbers. This is a bit of an inside joke, but it is true in that he will say the same thing. Know your numbers. Be prepared. It's not just about sort of casually knowing your industry, but really spending time knowing, memorizing, internalizing these numbers and becoming a master in your domain. The other aspect of time management that I kind of alluded to earlier is that most people don't budget their time well, in that they think I can start a company at any point. But what most people don't realize is there are, I think when you're young, you don't realize how difficult life gets when you get older. So who in here is married with kids? Oh, very few. All right. Well, okay, you guys have it good right now. Everybody who's not married with kids, good time to start this company. Because I'll tell you from first-hand experience, once you have a child and a spouse, it becomes much more difficult because it's all about time allocation. When I was single, and I started my first company at 24 years old. I'm now 44 years old. And when I started my first company, I could work from 9 a.m. till midnight and no one would question me. But now I have a family that I need to spend time with, my wife that I need to spend time with, and it becomes very difficult. So it cuts into also my opportunity to develop mastery in an area. So when I talk to founders, I say use as much while you have the freedom. If you're not married, if you don't have kids, use all that time to get stuff done, to learn about your industry, to develop an expertise. Because basically, this graph shows your life in weeks. Early years, elementary, high school, so on. And average age of marriage in Taiwan is 30. Average age of having a first child is 31. And the average time for a startup to exit is about 8 to 10 years. So if you're trying to exit your company before you get married and have kids, then you pretty much have to start around 21. If you're going just by the numbers. And most of us don't start companies that early. But in San Francisco, there are a lot more. You definitely see a lot more younger founders. So what I tell people is condense that time. Don't waste time while you have the opportunity. Time is a precious resource. I think a lot of people understand the value of money because it's very tangible, but time is something that not everybody grasps as well when trying to manage the resources. So, to cover preparedness, be prepared. You're going to war. Be resourceful in how you're using your time and your money, because the further you are along, the more impressed your investors will be. Know your numbers. Spend time understanding your industry, your data, your customers, everything. Because the better you know your numbers, the more impressive you will be to your investors. And finally, start early. That is not something you can always control, but if you can't start early, then try to compress more work in the days that you have. So essentially, work longer hours. Persona. The second P is persona. And persona is defined as the aspect of someone's character that is presented to you or perceived by others. Now, oh wow, 5 minutes. I think this is really long. Sorry. So I'm gonna speed through this. Okay. This is who we are, but this is who we want to be perceived as. When I was young, I had 0 credibility. I had a baby face. Nobody took me seriously when I went to meetings, and it was always very intimidating for me. So I think when you're young, you don't have that confidence, you don't have that belief because you haven't accomplished anything. So I was that, but I was trying to project that. The way you can do that is, there's a saying, fake it till you make it. And even though you don't have the credentials, you may not believe that you are going to be the Jeff Bezos, Terry Gould, the Steve Jobs of the world. You have to at least try to fake it. You have to pretend you are. And you have to make yourself believe that you are. And you can do that by understanding the things that make these people so successful. Angela Duckworth wrote a book called Grit. I highly recommend reading this book. Yeah. In it, she talks about what is the one key characteristic that sets ordinary people from extraordinary people apart. And that's grit. People that have had tremendous success often show grit. And grit is basically your passion, your perseverance, your ability to push through difficult situations. The more you can show these types of characteristics, and I highly recommend reading that book because it will help you to understand the characteristics and help you see the things that will set yourself apart from others. And will help you push through the difficult times. Here are some characteristics of successful entrepreneurs that you often see. They're passionate. They will work and do something regardless of money. And that's what really passion is. Determined. They will do things at all costs to get stuff done. They're optimistic. I can't tell you how many people told me that my ideas would fail, whatever I'm doing is not good enough, or there's other people on the market that are already doing it. And you're going to hear this, but you have to be optimistic and believe in yourself. Fearless. It's sort of tied to optimism in that you have to believe that you're going to get through whatever you're enduring. And creative. Some of the best solutions are not obvious. You have to find creative ways to get to them. The third P, presentation. This is defined as the giving of something, especially to someone, especially as part of a formal ceremony. So when I tell people, when you're presenting to an investor, when you are giving a pitch, you're essentially giving them a gift. And it may not always feel like that because of the way investors may treat you, but you're sharing something very special. So when you give somebody a gift, don't give them a sheet. Give them a nice gift. Give them something good. Give them something that looks good. Give them something that has meaning. And to do that, you first want to make sure your gift looks good. And then, okay, we're fine with this. Okay. I see a lot of pitch decks, a lot of products, a lot of apps. The developers think they look great, but they don't really look good. And I used to have a Nokia phone like this. I used to love it until I got my iPhone. And I realized, oh my god, I didn't know things could be this good. If you have a pitch deck or if you have a presentation, if you don't have a really good designer, then spend some resources and go out and get one. Oftentimes, less is more. Just because you have way more buttons doesn't mean this remote is better. And oftentimes, it takes a lot more work to make things simple than it does to add a bunch of stuff. Whether it's your pitch deck or your product. Your pitch deck, I see pitch decks overflowing with content. Your pitch deck should be a prop. Your audience should be listening to you and watching you instead of trying to read your deck while you're giving a pitch. If you don't have a designer, here are some design resources that you can go to. And okay, I'm going to kind of fly through this. My time's up. Okay. Storytelling. The second part of the presentation is being a good storyteller. Don't just talk about the technical merits of your product or how awesome your team is. Tell a story, because good stories elicit emotional responses, and emotional responses lead to your body producing two chemicals that are very important: oxytocin and cortisol. Cortisol helps create focus, so people will pay attention to you. Oxytocin will help people feel empathy. The greater an emotional response that your story can elicit, the more oxytocin and more cortisol your body will produce. And there are studies by this guy called Paul Zak that have shown the higher amounts of oxytocin and cortisol that is in your blood will lead to basically, he's done a study that he told people stories and he measured very emotional stories, and he told, and then they measured the amount of oxytocin and cortisol in blood. And then at the end of it, they asked them to make a donation. And the amount of the donation was directly correlated to the amount of oxytocin and cortisol in their blood. So the more oxytocin and cortisol that is in their blood, the more they donate. So if you want investors to give you more money, tell a good story. And there's something called a dramatic arc, or narrative arc, or story arc. The basic structure of how to write and how to craft a good story. And I won't get into this because it'd be very long. So, presentation, tell a good story, invest in good design. And those are the 3 B's. And then, last thing, if you're interested in startups and working with Silicon Valley companies, we have an organization called Taiwan Mafia. Check it out at mafia.tw, and you can learn more about it. Sorry for running over. Thank you for your time.